Trigger warning. This episode may discuss one or more of the following topics: violence, death, including that of people of Indigenous descent, war, abuse, medical issues, self-harming behaviour, eating disorder behaviour or body shaming, drug and alcohol addiction, sexual activity, hate speech or strong abusive language, discrimination, and stereotypes. These potential topics have remained part of the episode as it forms part of the interviewee's story, which cannot be accurately told without including such information. Viewer and listener discretion is advised. G'day and welcome to another episode of Spectrum Uncensored. Today I have with me Trina from Melbourne in Victoria. Thank you for taking some time to have a chat today.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
No worries. Did you want to tell me a little bit about what you were diagnosed and when you were diagnosed?
Okay, so I'm 52 years old and it's only just about a year since I was diagnosed. I've known, like many people, for a long time. Pretty sure that I was autistic. I was diagnosed autism level 2. What else? ADHD, PDA, pathological demand avoidance.
Yep.
Complex CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and giftedness. So I got to add a whole lot of acronyms to the end of my name.
It's definitely a bit of a rap sheet. I pretty much got all of those too, including the CPTSD. So I don't think you can kind of go through your childhood undiagnosed and not end up with trauma of some description.
I completely and utterly agree. How old are you?
I'm 33, and I was only diagnosed last year too. So, yeah, a couple of days after my 32nd birthday, I was diagnosed. So, yeah. I mean, obviously, I had the benefit of being diagnosed earlier than you in the grand scheme of life. But I will say when I looked at your profile and you said 52, I'm like, no, she's not.
I feel it.
But so how does your disabilities affect your day to day?
Every moment of every day is affected by being neurodivergent. There's not a second that isn't. So for me, it's like I'm experiencing an enormous amount of data. There's an enormous amount of information that's coming to me from the external world, from my own internal experience all the time. And then I'm experiencing that data, like physically, so sensations in my body, like tingling or pressure or tension. And then I'm experiencing the sheer amount of that data on an emotional level, like my emotions are really big. Joy is really big and sadness is really big. My partner came home from work the other day and he walked in the door and I was crying, snot, tears everywhere. He's like, do I need to be worried? He said, is it Grey's Anatomy? And I said, yeah, it's Grey's Anatomy. And he's like, okay. And then just got on with, cooking dinner. And so that's the emotions. And then on a thought level, that data is kind of coming in and being received on a thought level here, everywhere, right? So that sheer amount of data, the receptivity of that data, and then the gathering and compiling together and the processing of that data on all those different levels, the resources required to do that are enormous. And just like, I don't think that, and unless you've experienced it yourself, you can truly understand the sheer amount of resources that go into just existing.
And trying to prioritize all that information too, I find like you're trying to work out what's most important to kind of process first, and it's practically impossible. It's just like I've had a few people describe it as like bees in your brain, like constantly buzzing around, and it's just chaos. And that's, I don't know, it's just, there's no real other way to describe it except chaotic and intense.
Yes, exactly. And then you find yourself, in social interactions and all this data's coming to you, right? And people, throughout my life have said to me so many times, you're too intense, or you overthink things, or don't take things so personally. But I can't help it. It's like I can't switch down the way that my body receives this data and this sensory input all the time, and then the challenges that I have with um, the sensory processing of all that information. It's like trying to tell me not to have an arm when I have an arm. Like,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. But the effect that has on your sense of self and your self-worth and your self-esteem is, why people like you and I end up with, CPTSD, because of that denigration of the essence of, what our true experience of life is. So in those social situations, when I'm talking to somebody, and sometimes words in sentences from a person don't arrive in straight lines. There's a word here and a word there and a word here, and I'm quickly trying to put them into the right order so that I can then understand what is actually being said to me, at the same time of picking up on all these micro cues that are taking place in their body, and then putting all that together, and then kind of trying to make sure that the wrong words don't come out of my mouth, right? Because that what's socially acceptable here, because I'm noticing all these micro things, and that becomes a challenge. And it's not to say that every single moment of my life is horrible or terrible. That's not my point. It's just that the managing of my resources has to be meticulous for me to function as a everyday person. And so if something happens, for instance, like somebody turns up late to something, like the dysregulation that I feel through my body on every single level, the thought level, what's going on, what's happening, the emotional level might be rage, and the physical sensations that I'm having, kind of trying to quickly regulate that together so that I don't just completely and utterly collapse and fall apart into nothing, into a pool of water, and just disintegrate into ash, um, is huge. And then it'll be, yeah, but Trina, I was only 20 minutes late or something. It's like, that's going to take me quite a while to recover. And now I'm standing here trying not to cry, because I'm stressed and I'm worried about how I'm going to do all the stuff that I have planned for the rest of the day.
Yep.
Because
that knock-on effect.
Exactly, the knock-on effect, because I've used way more resources than I had planned I was most likely going to need for this particular task.
Yep. Yeah. And I think too,
sorry,
you get like people saying that we're critical, or like we're kind of perfectionists in a way. We're kind of all in, so it's all or nothing kind of thing. But we just want it to work. We want systems to work. So we get kind of like that labeled with that, they're rude or abrupt, or and yeah, we do have that no filter problem. So, and the no, like, we have tact, but it's just like not really knowing. We don't have the tools to kind of know when to use those things a lot of the time. So it's as you say, trying to work out in social settings what to say and what's acceptable, and saying even timing is hard. Like we'll cut people off, or we won't know when to say our part, and then you'll be trying to follow along the conversation. You're like, I can do this, I can have a conversation, and then you're trying to keep up with what they're saying while you're trying to think of what you're going to say, but then you keep letting them talk, and then that moves the goalposts, and then you're like, okay, so I can't say that now, we're too far gone, so you're trying to think of the next thing. And it's almost like dyslexia of the thoughts, because it's, as you say, it's very jumbled up, so you're trying to marry everything up, and then by the time you do, that moment has passed.
Yes, That's right. Yeah, absolutely. That is my experience as well.
Yeah,
Mm.
and I think like, do you feel like you've got friends and stuff that are neurodivergent too, or a mixture of both?
Um, the friends that I'm close to, that I am closest to at the moment, definitely have aspects of neurodivergence.
Yep.
Um, and then I, for instance, am meeting a couple of friends tomorrow, and I've only literally just told them.
Yep.
I'm very discerning about who I come out to and when I come out,
Yep.
my own protection. And so I do find that I jive much more easily with the neurodivergent people. I've recently joined a neurodivergent meetup group, which is a
Oh yeah.
fortnight, and
Yep.
I was there last Friday, and it was it was really enjoyable actually, because we speak on fun kind of more superficial level. For instance, like somebody was saying, my coworkers think I'm weird because when I go and get lunch and I order a hamburger, I ask that there be one piece of lettuce on top of the bottom bit of bun, and then that has to be dried properly if you wouldn't mind, and then if you can put this on, the other piece of lettuce up there, and then and he said, and they think I'm weird, and everyone just went, no, that's like, yeah, we totally understand. That's normal.
It's
I have my,
liberating.
exactly, I have my own
Yeah.
perception of that. And then, so this level, right down to the depths of, some of the more existential pain that you're dealing with, personally and interpersonally on a day to day level. And just being in a group of people that can go from here to 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 here, keep up with you, not have to feel so self-conscious about it. And yeah, I find that quite enjoyable. And you've got permission to stim there should you need to. One of the things that I find, a pathological demand avoidance. So the sheer amount of demands in this world is overwhelming. And whether, the demand might be something like having a shower, like I'll go, days. I'm not going to say how long I would go. you know,
I get what
like,
you're saying.
yeah. And just the demand to not stim, I do a lot of verbal stimming, and I do a lot of movement stimming, and moving my body around. This morning I went and got coffee, and I was standing there waiting for my takeaway coffee, and I was dancing. And nowadays I let myself do that kind of stuff, and I guess my sense of self is such that I can hold myself through, not always, but a lot more easily I can hold myself through the fact that it's uncomfortable for other people what I'm doing, and just focus on the fact of how comfortable it is for me.
Yeah.
And and then other times I can't. Yeah. So I just completely went off track then
No,
into,
that's all right.
yeah.
I like that. Yeah, I didn't realize how much I was stimming until I was diagnosed, and I do a lot of that vocal stimming. So I'll just start singing about random things. Like I'll try. All of a sudden, my life will just become a musical, and I'll be singing about a sandwich I'm making or something.
I have so many musicals. I put musicals on for my dog, my partner. I sit them down as an audience, and I do a complete production, and I look my partner in the eyes so intensely, and I make him hold my stare.
Yep.
And at the end of it, he always says to me, "It was the look on your face that was so deeply disturbing." It was like, yeah, yeah.
Well, that's the thing is, like, I've realized that a lot of my eccentric kind of aspects of my personality are stims and things. Like,
Yes,
I'll do the same thing. I'll dance around, and especially when I'm happy, like it's almost like the happy flapping kind of thing.
yes,
That my son does a lot of that. But it's just interesting and it's nice. It's so empowering and liberating when you just embrace yourself
yeah,
as who you are, and I guess what you are in a way. But But yeah, it is hard, and I really appreciate you actually coming and chatting, because it must be a big thing for you knowing that this is going to be distributed. You were saying that you are very selective with who you normally would tell. So but I find like it's very liberating when you just lay it out all out on the table, because I've found like it's very scary in the beginning, and you're worried that you're going to lose people and lose friends and things like that. But I've kind of gotten to that place now where it's like, if I lose them, they weren't for me anyway. Like all my friends are neurodivergent for sure. So yeah.
I'm trying to find more of a neurodivergent community. So if there's anybody out there that lives in Melbourne and that wants to connect, I'm really open to that.
Yep.
I feel like I need that more in my life, so that I've got that sense of belonging to help kind of reduce the level of aloneness and isolation that I can feel at times. You know, I'm talking about the joy, and the joy is real. And then those other places of, you know, I don't know if you experience this too, Jamie Lee, but I'll go through periods where I'm like, I'm not autistic. I'm just, I don't know, unwell.
Yep.
And I mean, I don't know, that might sound really wrong. But even what I mean by that is that I get pathologized so often.
Yep.
So I'll be expressing my experience of the world, and people will think that maybe I'm looking to solve a problem. I'm not. I'm just expressing my experience of the world, and then it'll be like, oh well, you know what you can do to make sure that doesn't happen or this doesn't happen is that you should be doing more of this, or maybe you should be doing that. It's very invalidating and diminishing to my sense of self to be constantly told what is not right with me and what I need to fix. When I'm not a pathology, I'm a difference. And yeah, and that can be super draining until I get to a point where I sort of start to believe it as well. Maybe I'm just a pathology. But then they're usually the times when I've experienced some very significant burnout in my life, and continue to. And so they're the times that I have to go into isolation. And I think that that's also one of the tricky things about social connection, because I really crave social connection. And that is that I will have to disappear sometimes, completely disappear. I can't return your phone calls. I can't reply to your text messages. Just the demand, even though you're not being demanding, but just the demand of needing to even think about replying is, I'm incapable of it. You
And that's
know,
the good thing about having neurodivergent friends. They get that. But then
exactly.
there are so many things at play, because if you feel that you have to remove yourself, you suddenly are worried that, oh, you're going to get a bit of RSD with the rejection sensitivity
Yeah.
dysphoria, and you'll be like, oh, are they going to then not be my friends anymore because I've disappeared for a month? And then you're going to get, like, you've got the PDA side of things, and then it's just, when the more kind of disabilities you have, the more compounded it becomes, because they all kind of work against each other. And
Yes.
I'm starting to think that, I'm starting to think that I have PDA as well, because
Mm.
there's times where I just can't make a decision, and it, someone's like, what do you want for dinner? And it's like, I just can't, like, just you decide. And they're like, but it's just a simple question. You want this or this? And I'm like, I just can't, just please just make the decision for me. And it's the same with ADHD and things like that. There's so many different push and pull effects, as you were demonstrating, and especially you got the autism and the ADHD that pushes and pulls against each other, and it's a lot. And the more you have with that kind of stuff, I feel the more susceptible you are to the burnout. And
Yes.
I've thought, there's been times where I've thought, oh, as you say, with autism, like, am I autistic or am I just ill? And there's been times where I've thought, do I have some of these things, or do I just have like depression or something? Am I just really
Mm.
depressed? So it's so hard. Like, I've got that anxiety on top of things. I think with these kinds of diagnoses, you're going to have anxiety no matter
Yeah.
what. But it is, the more people don't really realize that you can have all of these disabilities and then they all fight against each other. And so that's happening in your head 24/7. It's not something that's like it's autism one day and ADHD the next. I mean, there's moments where you feel like you're on top of the world, and that without these disabilities you wouldn't have these extra kind of superpowers of like hyper focus. Like when you're hyper focused, it's like, wow, this is amazing, I'm just like on top of the world and I could do anything. And then you dive, and then it's like, no, I can't.
How do I come out of that focus? Like, and if somebody pulls me out of that focus when I'm in a hyper focus, I can be extremely angry.
Yep.
Because how am I going to get back into that flow again? And my hyper focus means that my capacity to work, because I work a job that is my special interest,
Yep.
means that the special interest allows me to be able to hyper focus in many ways, because it's
Yes.
very hard for me to focus on something I'm not interested in. And I'm just like, I feel like a machine that's just like, when I see this here
Kicking
and see
goals.
that there and here and da da da, and it's so dynamic, and it can be really enjoyable. And at times it feels like I'm being, instead of me sort of like sitting at the center of that and kind of owning that, I'm being kind of like dragged along by that, and it feels incredibly depleting. But yeah, exactly. There are aspects to the autism and the ADHD, and there's different diagnoses that give me. And I think like the nowadays, I do get depressed, and but I have, I've been in this body for 52 years now, witnessing my experiences, gathering knowledge and wisdom from those experiences, my highs, my lows, and my in betweens, to gather a kind of working knowledge of how to be me and survive. And the fact that I've survived, I count as one of my greatest achievements. And at times, I've not only survived, I've thrived. I count that as an achievement, because there's many times where survival has felt like it's never going to happen.
Yep.
I'm never going to actually make it through this moment to the next moment. It's not possible. And that's usually when depression hits.
Yep.
And I feel like I've become relatively good, and I've invited, my closest friends and my family to help me out with this, to,
Yeah.
when I am depressed versus when I am burnt out, etc., so that I can manage with the right accommodations and the right support and the right tools. And then coming back to that idea of pathologizing, like when I first met my partner, about 11 years ago now, he really gave me permission to just be myself. And, right from the he's a pretty intense person himself, and is, had his own struggles in his life, so isn't afraid of intense emotion and
Yep.
intensity and intense experiences, right? Like many other people I've encountered are. And so I have to zip it,
Yep.
and, hang out more on the surface to make everybody else comfortable. But is that he really gave me permission to just go for it, just be you, Trina. And at first he would want to try and problem solve me if I would crash. He'd want to try and
Yep.
problem solve me. But then after a while, he found that the best thing he could do would be take care of the a grand majority of the demands in my life, even though he wouldn't use this language. Make me dinner, and hold the edges and just hold the space, because I'm not, I have a certain amount of wisdom, and I'm not stupid, and
Yep.
I know how to deal with me. And if I don't know, then I've got quite a bit of resources to go to nowadays.
That's the thing. I think a lot of people treat it as incompetence, and that's where trouble
Yeah.
begins. Is it's you're not incompetent, you're just having a moment, and the moment will pass. It just we can't say when, but it is. It's you do get depressed, and you have your really low lows and your high highs, and life is all ups and downs. So that doesn't really fly with us. Like, we just like to be, on the level plane, nice and routine. But as I say, comorbidities also prevent that from occurring. You've got the autism routine, but then you've got the impulsivity of ADHD. So it's just like, it's a bit of a mess. But it sounds like at least you've got some good supports in place, and it sounds like you've got a really fantastic partner who does just embrace all that you are, which is what everybody, neurotypical or otherwise, neurodivergent or
Mm.
otherwise, wants in their life. So it's all about finding those supports and having people that give you that ability to go, okay, I'll let you carry me through for a little bit. So
Mm.
it is very, very important. And you were saying your career, so
Mhm.
that did that kind of stem from, do you feel like, obviously you were only diagnosed last year, but
Mhm.
and you've been doing your career a lot longer, but do you feel like it's kind of been, you've chosen that through influence of that potential neurodiversity at the time? Do you feel like it
Yeah,
kind of was
totally.
like your calling as a result?
Yeah, totally. I mean, you know, I have, as well as all, those different neurodiverse diagnoses, I have other health diagnoses, and I think that that's fairly common. Like autoimmune diseases and so forth, in people with neurodivergence. I have many personal theories around that. I think a lot of it's to do with the consumption of resources and the inability to be able to build those resources up as fast as you're using them, and
Yep.
then the effects that has on the body physiologically, mentally, and emotionally. And I was finding myself with physical symptoms that I would go to the doctor, and I just kept being put in these boxes that didn't fit, and it was very dislocating and distressing. And I have a wonderful GP who I'm super grateful for. She's actually really supported me right throughout my life. Um, and then I ended up getting some acupuncture for endometriosis,
Yep.
and I found that really helpful. And then I was wanting to change careers. I was in my early 20s. I kind of hit this point where I realized that I had no idea who I was, that
Yep.
I was a collection of these different ideas of who I thought I should be, but there was no substance in there, and it was
Yep.
very distressing, and it was like an existential breakdown.
I can relate to
And
that. It's just
yeah,
mask after mask, and you don't know
yeah,
what's real anymore.
exactly. And
Yep.
so I went and I studied traditional Chinese medicine at university and got my degree. And psychicness runs in my family. So I then, as I was practicing, Chinese medicine, I put my hands on acupuncture points and I'd pick up all this information from people. And there's definitely a level of my neurodivergence that's involved in that, but it's not entirely my neurodivergence. I'm not sure, like, some of the giftedness is involved in that, and some of it is just, biological, from my genetics, I think. And so now I work as a psychic spiritual healer, but I ended up going in that direction because I just wasn't getting the understanding about what was going on for me
Yep.
and how it all fitted together.
Yeah.
And then I was able to get more understanding from that, and I was able to improve my quality of life, by reducing some of my symptomology and having more tools to manage my symptoms, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And one of the things that actually drove me to get a formal diagnosis was because I actually work with quite a few neurodivergent kids.
Yep.
And when I'm working with them and we start discovering that they're neurodivergent, and then I tell their parents, and I recommend that they go and see this professional. And then when I tell the parents that I too am neurodivergent, that I am autistic, ADHD, and all the other things, the relief for them is significant because they see me as, you know, having having a life in some way, and they're terrified for the future of their kids, and so I thought that, you know, being a spiritual healer is already too odd in our world as it is, you know, and so I wanted the credibility of that stamp that says yes, you are, and I was pretty sure that I was certain anyway, but yeah, so yeah.
I mean, you always are. I feel like everyone knows deep down, but it does. It hits you differently when somebody actually says to you, yes, you definitely are, that, you know, can actually formally diagnose you. But in regards to diagnoses, what would you say to somebody that suspects that they could have one or more disabilities and they haven't been diagnosed yet? What advice would you give them?
So I found it a lengthy decision to make about whether or not to pursue a diagnosis. I also want to acknowledge the privilege in being able to do so, having access to resources and money, you know. I'm not rich by any stretch of the imagination, but, you know, it's costly and it's hard. There's not many resources out there to get diagnosed. And so I would say allow yourself to process that decision for as long as you need to, because I think that the deeper that you've arrived at, you know, I often say to people, a no is a no, you know, when you feel a no, and then when a maybe is a maybe, don't try and make a maybe a no or a yes, you know, like stay in that zone of maybe for however long you need to until you feel like you've made the right decision for you. So I would say that to them. I would say that I was surprised by the relief. I sort of didn't really expect that. I guess I'd had many different, you know, I have medical trauma as well. You know, my psychologist calls it. So, you know, there was aspects of me that didn't want to put myself in the medical system.
Yep.
Due to, you know, the experiences that I'd had in the past. Even though I've had some really good medical experiences as well, I'm definitely not against Western medicine or anything like that. I believe holism includes every type of therapy and every type of medicine, and what works for you, go for it. That's great.
Trust is important though.
Yeah, trust and feeling safe. You know, when you have CPTSD, like feeling safe is a major thing. So, yeah, and when I went to my GP, I went to her and I said to her, I think I'm autistic. I definitely and have ADHD. And she went, no. And I went, yeah. And she went, not you, Trina. You're really successful. And which you know, like no shame on her, right? Like she just, you know, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do your podcast, Jamie Lee, because we need to raise awareness, right? We need to make it safe and comfortable for people to, you know, be able to disclose the misunderstandings that they have so that they can actually get themselves educated, and that makes it better for all of us and especially for the children out there, right? So,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so she was like, no. She goes, well, tell me why you think that. And I said, well, the sheer amount of organization that goes into me doing any one thing in any one day shouldn't be that much. And then I started to articulate to her, and she's like, oh my goodness, that does sound like autism. And that bit does sound like ADHD. I'm just a very effective masker, right?
Yeah, and women are generally, and most of it's going on in our heads, so no one can see it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I didn't, you know, reveal all that stuff to people. And when I've revealed it to other professionals, in the past, they've put me in some boxes that don't suit me and sent me down treatment paths that have utterly failed.
Yep.
So, you know, that was scary. And so then she set me up with somebody and I got the diagnosis. And then when I did get that diagnosis, there was a level of like, you know, I cried quite a bit.
Yep.
Feel quite emotional saying, like, yeah, because
it's a grieving process.
Yeah, and it's grieving, but it's also just like a big out breath, you know, like like
You feel
oh
all the emotions really tied into it. You go
yeah,
through grief and then you go through
mm,
happiness now that you know, but then yeah, it is. It's a lot to take in, and
mm.
I mean you start trying to process your entire life up until that point too with that new information.
Yeah, everything kind of goes through a reorganization inside.
Yes.
It's like, oh yeah, that bit. Oh yeah, that bit makes sense. Oh yeah, that bit makes sense. You know,
Yes.
everything reorganizes inside of you, like somebody shifts all the books on the bookcase, and then you're like, yeah, right. And I think that the ultimately it was a boost to my sense of self and my self-esteem, and I'm personally glad that I did it. So therefore I would say, if you're considering getting a diagnosis, make the decision that's right for you. Work through whatever you need to work through so that you know, you're not re-traumatizing yourself, you're building yourself up, you know. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, definitely got to take care of yourself and
Mm.
kind of got, support yourself through that kind of process and that journey. But thank you so much for your time and coming in and chatting to me. It's been an absolute honor to get to know you and have a chat. I love
Thank
meeting everybody. I haven't come across a single person that isn't awesome. So, and I don't expect to because we all are. But thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.